Today I sat down with Greg Elfrink. Greg is the director of marketing, rising his way up through the ranks when it was really a small company, a team of maybe he was the third or fourth employee. I know we go through this in the podcast. It's now at about 60 to 70. Again, you'll hear it in the podcast, but we talk a lot about marketing, which we're both passionate about, and he actually sits in that seat, how he builds out his teams and what's important and how he approaches it from a digital perspective. So I think there's a lot to learn in this episode, and you really get to hear us geek out on certain things that relate to marketing. I hope, like always, you enjoy this as much as I did, sitting and chatting with professionals in their field, growing companies. Welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I talk to world-class professionals on what it takes to scale successful businesses. I dive deep asking questions to people who are running unicorn businesses, to raising funds, to buying businesses, mergers and acquisitions, IP and patent law, what is to manage performance management. I mean, the list goes on. The idea really is, how do I create knowledge and learning for you guys listening in? And of course, myself, getting the floor with people who I, in many cases, would never dream to share a room with. Before we jump into the episode, I've got to give a special thank you to our sponsors. Firstly, over at Global Wide Advisors, a leading digital consumer products investment bank focused on optimizing the sales process. An incredible team, always happy to pick up the phone and educate you or anyone about the sales process and what you should really consider, and can obviously help take you to market or even acquire businesses. I ring them for just about everything these days. Us over at Multiply Me, we are the end-to-end executive search and HR function into the Philippines, helping find better talent and onboarding them effectively. And last but not least, Escala, our management consultancy focused on process improvement, where we help build better systems for your business. That's all the ads you're going to get from me, ladies and gentlemen. The rest is all about learning. I hope you really enjoy and get as much out of these sessions as I do, sitting face to face with some of the world-renowned leaders in their respective fields, asking them the tough questions that they're not often asked. All right, Greg, welcome to an episode of Successful Scales, my friend. How are you doing?
Dude, man, I'm glad to be here. Hopefully I'll be able to add some value to your audience.
I already know you well, and I'd even say, there's a little glimpse of it, guys. But Greg, I haven't told you, you probably have the most infectious laugh I've come across in a long time. So every time you're sitting there laughing, I cannot help myself. So there'll be a lot of laughter here today, guys. I hope you're all happy people and enjoying it. But thank you.
This is a super random tangent, but when I worked in the oil field, my crew, they would always laugh at my laugh. And they would start mimicking my laugh, which would make me laugh. And it becomes this like eternal vicious cycle of me laughing at them mocking my laugh.
I can see how that happened. I get it. You know what? If I was on that oil rig with you too, mate, I'm sure I'd be one of them there. But that's a great segue. Even though you're trying to tangent us, I'm going to say that, I've gotten to know you a little bit. I had a look on LinkedIn too. So I've seen some of the aspects around sort of the media or Google SEO and I guess Google AdWords work. But for those who don't know who you are, would love you to talk a little bit about you and where you're at and what you've done and all those fun little aspects that have brought us to where we are today.
Sure. So my name is Greg Elfrink, and I'm the head of marketing over at Empire Flippers. And I used to work on the oil fields in Alaska, but now I live in bombing Vietnam. I'm in Saigon, Vietnam right now. Traditionally a digital nomad, but not in the last year and a half or so. But yeah, I started off as just a simple blogger at Empire Flippers a little bit over 5 years ago. And we've had dramatic growth over the years. And now I lead the entire marketing team as we get bigger and bigger. To put it in perspective of how much we've grown, I was employee number 4, I think it was. Now we're at 84 employees. And back then, when I first got started, I remember one of our co-founders, Joe, he was trying to sell this. He was our main salesperson back then. He was trying to sell a $150K business. And he's telling me, Greg, once they get to $150,000, it's a different ball game. It's totally different. Like you have to have whole new sales skills to be able to sell this, right? And as of like 2-3 months ago, we sold our first like $12 million business. we've definitely have grown in big ways over the years.
Yeah, very, very impressive. And I mean, that 4 to 84 over the years. And you've been there for, did you say 5 years?
Yeah, I'm basically Grandpa Empire at this point.
Grandpa Empire. I like that.
With my team, like, oh man, there's so many listings, right? Like, you have no idea what it was like back in my day.
So hang on. I want to take a few steps back. So how does someone who's working in the oil fields end up as the director of marketing at Empire Flippers? Like, what was the transition, or how did you find yourself in that position? And I'm going to give you a shit ton of accolades or mad respect here. I mean, I was talking to you about your email sequences and just about the podcast, and just from featuring on your podcast, how much action I've been getting on the back of it. And it's a true testament to what you've been able to build in 5 years. Long time, not that long a time as well. When you talk about going from selling $150,000 business, and that's being a huge deal, to a $12 million business, in 5 years, that's a different market when you're talking about sort of the buying and selling market in the audience. So, we can probably get into the complexities of what that means from a psychology standpoint and how you're positioning things, etc. But I mean, taking a step back, how did you end up there?
Yeah, it's an interesting story in the sense that, like, growing up in Alaska, when I was turned 18, there's basically like 3 options you got in front of you. You can join, you could go to college, which I'm a terrible student. Like, I barely passed high school, so that's not happening. Like, the only class I could do is literature because I'm a literature nerd. And then you could go into the military, but I am terrible at following directions. I am not a very good soldier, so I probably would have been like dishonorably discharged. Then there's the oil field. So I chose the third option, became an oil field roughneck, but hated it. I was always obsessed with marketing, like even from a young age, because I view marketing as like I view myself as an artist, which sounds weird, but I view marketing as like the most applied form of art there is. And it's like, I think it's one of the most powerful things you can learn, especially if you're an entrepreneur, which I think most of us in the space can probably agree. That's what most entrepreneurs spend probably the majority of their time on a lot of the times. But yeah, so I was always obsessed with marketing. I became obsessed with internet marketing. I viewed it as a way to get out of the oil field and really make something of myself. And I remember learning so much about SEO and content marketing, which is what appealed to me the most. And applying for all of these agencies. And because I didn't have a college degree, they were like, no, we're definitely not going to hire you. Besides, television ads are better than SEO. Like, okay, you have like no idea what you're talking about, So I had basically given up and became a freelance writer, in addition to working in the oil rigs, when I got the job posting for Empire Flippers. And when I say I was really into internet marketing, I mean, I was obsessed. Like, I knew everyone, like anyone that was anyone in the space in terms of the affiliate niche site, like lifestyle businesses. I knew all of those people. Like, they didn't know me, but I was stalking them. You know what I mean? To try to learn as much as I could. So I had that first interview with Justin, who is one of our co-founders, and he's like, "Man, you seem to know like all this stuff, but you haven't done anything." And he's right. You're working like 18 hours a day on the oil rig. You don't have a lot of time to build something with traction, which is why I was just doing freelance writing. But he gave me the opportunity basically to come out and be a blogger. I took a pretty serious pay cut to do it, but and I was really afraid to do it because I thought like, well, okay, well, I'm going to prove to myself now I'm going to suck at this. Like I think I'm so much better than these agencies required this college degree or whatever, and now I'm going to prove that they were right, that do not hire me, right? But that didn't happen, thankfully. So yeah, it was Justin and Joe that gave me that opportunity, and flew out to Vietnam, and kind of the rest is history. I always loved the niche. So like, I love marketing and I love entrepreneurship, and I love what entrepreneurship can do for people. So I'm very passionate about the niche itself. And I think that helps me when it comes to marketing, that I'm such a big believer in what we do, because there's so many stories of lives we've changed over the years that I got to be an active participant in making that change happen. So I don't know if you know about the big filter in marketing. Have you ever heard of that idea?
No, but talk me through it. Talk dirty to me.
Let me rant to you this monologue of marketing, but it's a really simple concept. I think it's a really powerful concept, and I teach my team this. Is basically the big filter is step one, like who is your target market, who you're selling to, right? Step two is what's your product, and if you don't know what that is, you have deeper problems than marketing, right? But step three is what are you really selling? So that's like the emotional punchline of what you're selling. And the point of the exercise is draw out the pains and pleasures that your product serves to like really help you do better marketing. And for us, like our target markets, investors or entrepreneurs or people want to be one of those things. Our product is selling businesses, right? But what we really sell is an opportunity, and an opportunity to change your life in some meaningful way. Now, I always say that could be a negative opportunity, right? Because things can go wrong. Like you might spend $200,000 on us, and Amazon does some crazy update, and like the business goes south, right? It's a volatile industry, but at the end of the day, that's what we really sell is that opportunity, and thankfully most of it's positive, right? But and that gets me really excited. So and I think for entrepreneurs out there listening to that, it's a fun exercise. Like people might think that, oh, that's easy for you, Greg, because you sell businesses. But just like YouTube, the Don Draper Madman, like Clorox pitch commercial, because he uses a very similar thing in that scene where he basically talks about how to clean clothes and brings out the poetry of it, of how it's like, this is how you get to spend more time with your family by buying Clorox, so you can do it with really anything, even the most boring of products.
Yeah, but you touch on a really good point, and I took a whole lot of notes, and I want to actually dive into a little bit more about some of the things you said earlier. But this is something I think for entrepreneurs and for people who aren't savvy marketers, you bring up some really key points. So it's just like to break that down really simply, and what I'm sort of ascertaining is that you're not selling on features, you're selling on benefits. And so one of the core things when you talk about the big filter and the concept here is that you really need to understand, it doesn't matter if you're selling businesses, you're a brand, you're a service provider, you're an agency, you're any of these things. It's what are you unlocking that you otherwise couldn't if you didn't work with this business, buy this product, etc. Like that's what is the hook, line, and sinker. And so, yeah, if you don't know what you're selling, like you don't know what your product is, then yeah, you should probably figure that shit out.
Yeah, bigger issues.
Yeah, like that's a real problem. But if you've gotten to that point, you actually have to put yourself in the mind of the potential consumer, customer, acquirer. I also think as well, just to go back to Empire Flippers, it's also a beautiful thing when you're building effectively a marketplace where it is a win-win on both sides. It is a win for, of course, the investor, the business acquirer to not have to go through the arduous journey that, you and I effectively have just both been through with different businesses. I after this experience, I never, ever, ever want to build a business from scratch ever again. That is,
it's tough. It's really tough.
It is extremely hard. It is a lot of hours. And we were talking before we hit record, the beauties of working remote, you just have to pick the 18-hour time slot that you're going to work at. and that's what it is. I've stolen this from Greg. That was his line. But that's the reality when you're getting a business up and running. Whereas if you can acquire a business and you can actually take something that's already built and understand, well, how can I improve it? How can I scale it? How can I take it to the next level? You skip a lot of steps, and obviously there's different skill sets that are required in that. And that's why savvy investors or potential acquirers or whoever that's why they're sitting where they're sitting, and they've probably got the funds to back it up. But I also think it's a beautiful thing too, from the seller perspective. I mean, we're talking about in many cases, whether it's $200,000 or $12 million, for most people, it's life-changing money. And that's the reality. And you'd actually almost guarantee that every time a business is sold, it is in some way, shape, or form life-changing money, because, for a lot of these businesses, and what most people don't realize is that most of them probably aren't that profitable. You're not paying yourself this enormous salary because if we're talking about, the FBA model, for example, you're putting a lot of it back into the business. You're working extremely hard. Your inventory runs get larger. Your PPC spend gets bigger.
Yes.
Everything grows, and it just becomes this fight for cash, which effectively is oxygen in a business. And so having that exit really is that big sort of holy grail of shit. I've actually finally seen a dividend, or I'm paid. I've actually got that payday. So yeah, pretty cool to be facilitating and enabling, and from a marketing perspective, actually helping people achieve on both sides like some pretty exciting and lofty goals.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned there, I always tell entrepreneurs, like, when you started entrepreneurship, you thought this was like your path to freedom, and as you like get a more successful business, especially in e-commerce, I think it's especially pronounced in e-commerce, you realize there's all these cracks in that entrepreneurship dream where like, oh, I gave up my boss, but now my new boss is a faceless algorithm I cannot even speak with. You know what I mean? Like, and as you're more successful, you have more inventory, more demand, all this stuff. So I always tell them like the dream of entrepreneurship, it does exist, right? Like that financial freedom, all that kind of stuff. It just usually exists when you sell the business. That's when it happens, not while you're running it growing. And when you do sell, you get that life-changing capital, and it opens up so many doors of possibilities that just never used to exist. We're never even an option. Like, you could go start a new business with an actual budget. Most bootstrap entrepreneurs have no idea what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
Actually, the ability to hire the right people, the right technology, all that kind of stuff. So
it's a different ball game when you can sell that business. You can go again, or you can get funding and have less on the line and have all the access. I mean, it becomes a very as someone going through it right now, it could be a very, to me, it's like, that's very attractive. What I can actually pay myself a salary where I'm not sitting here and I'm like, cool, everything's going right back into the business. I can, and I'd also say as well, like, I mean, obviously talking to Empire Flipper here, where we're going to be talking about, what this actually means, but there is definitely that perpetual risk or gamble of like, I'm putting everything back into the business. If it all falls down, particularly for an FBA business tomorrow, then what have I really gained here? If I'm not paying myself the salary that I could get elsewhere, and if there isn't an eventual exit, or I'm not going to build, I'm in a service business. And so typically speaking, the margins are much higher. We're in a build phase, so we're not there yet. But, the goal is a couple of years from now, we have really high operating margins, and it's a cash flow business, in total transparency. And that's why you also build businesses that are service based. It's about the relationships, and it's about obviously high margins, because you have an expert skill set that most others don't have, and you can use that to your benefit. So I think going through this, and I'd love to dive in a little bit, just from a marketing perspective. I mean, you've grown a remote team. We'll touch on this in a little bit. You've grown a remote team. You're the fourth employee. We're talking 84 now. That's huge growth in 5 years' time, and that's entirely dispersed teams. I mean, you're in Vietnam. There's team members, from what it sounds like, all over the world at the moment. What's the journey been like for people who are sort of building their businesses today? What does it look like from you inside of Empire Flippers? Like, from content creation to building out, now you've got a team of 16. Did I make that number up?
11 now. So
I made it up.
We just onboarded 4. I've always kept my team kind of purposely smaller than the other teams, because I mean, the truth of it is, marketing, you get outsized leverage per labor than you do versus like sales or operation, right? A salesperson can only make so many calls, while a content marketer, yes, they can only produce so much blogs. But for example, almost a year ago at this point, I had my new hires do this Quora content strategy because I wanted to test it out. And to this day, like we haven't touched core in months, but that work they did is still producing for me. So like that kind of leverage you get in marketing, you don't really get in other departments. So I kept my team kind of small on purpose. I'm a subscriber you hire when you're in desperate need, like it's becoming like a part-time job to do a certain function. Like, okay, it's time to hire someone.
So how do you like, I mean, full transparency, I'm trying to build out my marketing team right now. So I spent 10 years in creative advertising, digital marketing. I worked with designers, developers, content writers, video producers, graphic designers, creative directors, art directors, the works. I worked in agency land, and I'm sitting here and I'm trying to build out my marketing team. So anyone who's sort of going through this process right now, I've got an incredible designer, UX UI designer. I've got a video producer / graphic designer. I don't have a copywriter at the moment. That's definitely, a key hire. I cannot spend time writing content as much as I would enjoy doing it. It's just not going to be the best use of my personal time. But when you're looking to build out your team, what are some of the things that have helped Empire Flippers scale effectively?
Yeah, this is something that we kind of did intuitively, I think, because I didn't really have it as crystal clear as it is in my head today, because I was learning a lot on the fly, constantly learning, to go from like back when I first started, writing a guest post on another person's website could meaningfully move the needle of the company, right? Nowadays, like there's just no way that like we still do guest content, obviously, but it doesn't move the needle like it did. So I have to keep upgrading my own knowledge over time. But I would say the essential components of a marketing team, like the first hire, if you're just starting out, you have no data. I think the first hire is what I call the showman. And I would kind of like fall into that category where I'm able to produce content. I'm able, like, maybe not the best, but I can do video, I can do podcasts, I can write content. I'm excited about the product. Like, to me, that's the most important first hire. But usually there's a problem with people like me, and I do have this problem, is that we're terrible people with data. We are not super analytical. We're hyper creative. And so usually we're terrible with numbers. Like I actually have a disability with numbers where I can't hold numbers in my head very easily, which is very funny when we're talking to my bookkeeper and she tells me like, all right, it's this much. Like how much? Like this is like the third time you asked me how much is it? Like, just write it down. It's like within like a 10-minute span, so usually the show people are, they're hyper creative, but they're not very analytical. So that's when you need the marketing ops person, the marketing operations to come in, who is the analytical side of the mix. So between these two, like my marketing ops supervisor always joke, him and I are one full stack marketer if you combine our powers. These are the people who are doing all that back end technical setup, and their whole role is twofold: to allow the showmen to produce as much as possible because that's their core strength, while also interpreting what happens after production to iterate on what's produced. So for example, we just did a bunch of heat mapping on our blogs, on our best pieces of content, to see if we could see any common themes. And that was our marketing ops team who did that. And they discover, okay, the CTA should be in the top third, like right here. The formatting should be more like this. This is what the trends are. Things like this. Like we see a lot of dead clicks around here whenever you're talking about the subject, or, there's like this burning passion for this one area that maybe we can expand into a new article, right? So that's the kind of like how the dance works. The creative people are like the super creative, experimental, always doing things, and the data person is like, okay, yes, this work, do more of this, do less of that. And they work in tandem like that. And the third people I would consider would be what I would call more of the hardcore promoter. And the hardcore promoter is someone who is probably really into media buying or understands how that stuff works. So basically they can accelerate the growth of your showmen, of all the content that's happening, feed more data into marketing ops, and marketing ops feeds data back to both of them so they can do their job better. And the whole process is to have these defined roles to allow each other's like creative ability to really flourish unrestricted. I think when you're first starting out, you need a generalist. So I started off as more of a generalist. Like I'm not terrible in analytics. I know a little bit, but I want to call myself an expert. When you have a small team, you want a generalist, and usually the generalist is going to be the best kind of person to oversee the whole marketing mix because they know a little bit of everything. So they know a little bit, they can delegate effectively because they know what is possible. Even if they don't know how to execute that specific thing, they know what is possible to be able to delegate. And that's kind of like the dream team in a nutshell, I guess.
I love it. I mean, you've broken down sort of the marketing from, what would you typically hear people talk more tactically, like, yeah, I get a PPC manager, I've got someone on my Facebook ads, I've got the designer, like I was talking about before, and the videographer and the photographer and this one and that one. But did we talk about traction? Have we talked about EOS before?
The book?
The book?
I don't think we have. I have read it. In fact, when I first got hired, my co-founder told me read this book. That was my training.
so I mean, you sort of inadvertently expressed what the traction model looks like inside of a marketing ops capacity. So, when you're talking about yourself effectively as the visionary around the marketing, the generalist, the person who can know enough and be super creative and bring things together, but then you have your marketing ops who can actually analyze, and they'd be the integrator, sort of breaking down the big information.
Yes.
And then you've also got the side of the implementers, where they're actually delivering on, like you said, the media buying and the aspects that are more tactical, but are the things that need to happen based on the integrator's information and how it sort of feeds out. And I think great way to break down marketing as a strategic component of any business and how you would build out that team. And I think it rings true for any business. And it's the only way really that you're going to be able to scale a department to 11, 3, 5, 50, whatever. If you don't have those key components running, well, nothing's perfect, but at least in some semblance of harmony, then you're not going to move the needle to the degree that you might hope to. So I mean, like we were talking about before, I'm looking for a marketing manager right now. Anyone listening, feel free to apply. But we are looking for someone who can really handle that marketing ops role. I would be the marketing creative, and that's been always my sort of strong suit, but I'm not like you as good at the numbers and operationally. I need to be, and for those who aren't watching me, I'm doing the air quotations because I'm being a little bit of a whatever, but you got to be in your flow state. And it's very hard to do that when you are trying to absolutely handle everything. So yeah, for a smaller team, for sure, you can have that generalist and keeping it small as well, being really good at a few key things. So don't try and build your podcast and then your blog and then your media campaigns. And then on top of that, you're building multiple websites like I have foolishly done here.
Me too. I think everyone in marketing does this. This is the great marketing dilemma. There's so much opportunity and you go after it all and you get nothing for it.
Seriously though, that's really it. And without that marketing ops person, without having someone who is actually saying, well, this is what's moving the needle, this is where the value is, focus purely on the podcast or focus purely on, it's funny. I mean, I've got a social media manager that I don't know how I haven't brought her up. I was actually, what's crazy is, I've got this podcast. Great. She is effectively like, I feel like she's a bit of a cult. She's like a cult hero / has an absolute cult following in the Philippines. So she's got like nearly 200,000 YouTube subscribers.
Wow.
She is an absolute boss. Rhea, you're going to listen to this and I'll call you out every single time. It is unbelievable what you've been able to achieve. And, I'm very fortunate that I get to work with her and learn. I kept saying, we've got this great two-year FBA financial planner. And every few days, someone downloads it. And I'm like, how in the hell, where are they finding this thing? In my head, I'm like, we set it and forget it somewhere. And that was the end of it. This is a great tool that we give away for free. And I find out that Rhea had been super strategic and she planted it on our YouTube channel and on, I think, the Successful Scales website. And so people are stumbling across it and they're actually finding a super valuable resource for free. And, if I had the marketing ops person or if I could have convinced her to become the marketing manager, which she graciously declined because, like I said, she's got a serious following and she loves the art of content creation. She's a serious artist in her own right too. So she has all these very strategic aspects of the marketing mix that she puts into practice. And, for me, it's a beautiful thing. But those are the things that are adding value to people's lives. Those are the things that, like, when you start to get that data and that input and that feedback, like, I know we should be doubling down on that. We should build a resource center on our website, and it should be all about the pieces of material that help people run businesses better. And, that's something that's high on the list. Once marketing manager, if you're listening, once you start going, these are going to be one of the tasks.
Listen to this episode. Do a good job, please.
Exactly, please. But that's just it. So you can't sort of hold all of the things close and be able to be successful in every aspect. But on a totally different tangent here, you struck a really you struck a chord with me when you talked about not studying, not getting a degree, applying for these jobs, not getting these jobs. And my co-founder, who he's a genius, but he didn't study. I coaxed him out of studying. I didn't coax him. He had every option not to join me. But Lippy decided to come and work with me, and we founded the businesses together. And, I think it's already paid off. But when I was explaining to him, I studied marketing. I studied marketing and management back in 2008 or whatever it was. And not one single thing was relevant to growing up into, that was like when social media had just become a thing, and it wasn't relevant. Like, nothing they were teaching in school was actually helpful. Like, I don't know if you ever read about Maslow's hierarchy and, like, I'm saying, like, that stuff, okay, nice, baseline. But I think that the internet today especially is such a powerful tool, and anyone who is going to have that entrepreneurial spirit and be motivated to learn, all the information is out there, and the information that you're going to get for free or for an online course where someone's really invested time is going to be intrinsically more valuable than going through, what's likely a stale 3 or 4 year degree, because you can't churn out information quick enough to get with the times, the pace in which things are actually growing today. Like, okay, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a surgeon, a pilot,
it's important for those degrees for sure. But like, I've seen degrees offering in SEO, and like, just this year alone, we've had I think it was 8 updates to the core updates that wrecked people's sites, or maybe they'll become superheroes depending on how it panned out for you. But it's just like, even hardcore SEOs don't really know what's happening anymore because it's so complex. Like, how's a 4-year that 4-year degree is going to be like 30 years outdated?
Legitimately. So yeah, I just wanted to say, like, from my standpoint, like, that's the way to get shit done. And, you find yourself in a position of being the director of marketing here because you're going to test, you're going to try, you're going to break things, you're going to figure it out. And I feel the best learning you'll ever have is going to be on the job, where it actually means something, not a pass or a fail on a test that, like we said, is probably outdated like the week after you finished it. So
you bring up a very good point, by the way, with what you just said there. And I think a lot of people, whether you're pursuing a career in marketing or as an entrepreneur, I think is very important, is the vast majority of marketing is failing. Like, even if you're really good, almost like 80-90% of what you do is not going to work. And a lot of times you won't know why it didn't work, but that's just like the nature of the game. And the best marketers, in my opinion, are always failing. They always have new experiments. So like, say they had a similar setup to me, what marketing ops gives to me, I weight that as like 40% of my decision. That's not my complete decision, because if I only did what the data told me what works, I'll never be able to create data that could work better, because I'm never going to experiment, right? So you always want to experiment and keep growing. And a lot of times these projects fail, but a lot of times they can succeed. And you only need a few projects to really succeed in marketing to change the entire face of your business in a dramatic way, especially if you're using something like internet marketing that is infinitely more scalable than more traditional offline kind of marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, to talk about like our growth as businesses too. Honestly, all of our growth has really come, and it's a philosophy that I hold deep just from a personal level. It's about the gift of giving without the expectation of reciprocation. So
Ah,
it's not about how can I sell something to you. It's about how can I add value to your life, and if that adds value, hopefully it entices you to dig a little deeper and say, well, where did this actually come from? And so our strategy virtually almost from the inception of the businesses was that we've created a series of these educational presentations to help people be better at things that are relevant to our business. So I just worked really hard for a few weeks. I read 3 or 4 books on the hiring process and took some of that learning, helped integrate that into the updated version of what our Multiply Me hiring process looks like, which is obviously an intrinsic value add to our business and our clients. But that presentation that I put together, I mean, I'm giving away effectively like all of our like trade secrets of like, how do you hire people? How do you make better decisions around hiring? How do you build a referral pipeline around potential candidates? How do you do a reference check? How important a reference check is? What is the true cost to business if you make a bad hire? How do you build your onboarding plan and your performance management and all the things that we do in our business? And giving them away for free and helping educate people, you could look at it and say, well, okay, you've just taught us everything. Like now we don't need to use you. But my logic is that, if this is the shit you're giving away for free, then imagine what it's like actually working with the company because they're built on these principles. But I would also say that we present to these communities and it costs nothing other than, obviously the time invested in putting it together. But when you can put that together and when you can educate a room of 200-300, digitally these days people and help them be better at whatever it is you are trying to achieve in your career, in your business, in your life, and that resonates with them, it has been how we've grown. In total transparency, that's been a big part of our secret sauce.
That's content marketing 101, right? Like I teach my team this too. Like if you want to get someone to sell their business with you, like use Empire Flippers, for example, teach them good enough where they never need to use us. And what's going to happen at the end of that is like, wow, that was valuable. This sounds like a lot of work. Why don't you just do it for me instead, right? And that's like the content marketing kind of marching song is like, here is everything you need to do and here's how to do it. No holds bar, right? And that makes people want to not do it because that's a lot of work to do it well, right? Like, oh, this is not nearly as easy as I thought. Like some people think this is kind of a funny recent story. So we have brokers that pop up all the time. And a lot of times these brokers that sell businesses, how they got the funding to start that business is they sold their business with us. So then they become our competitor. But a lot of times they end up realizing, oh, this is way harder than I thought it was. So they end up closing shop because they think, oh, it's just so simple, build an email list and send out businesses for sale. And it's very rarely that simple, right? But yeah, that's exactly right, man. I think if you provide that much value to where they can go do it, they're much more likely to actually just say, you know what, the opportunity cost of me doing it versus just hiring Yanni or Greg or whatever to do it is just too large. I have to hire them. There's no way I can do this myself, right? So that's a common content marketing strategy.
I mean, spot on, right? When you think about it too, especially when you talk about selling a business, right? And I would put it the same token as Escala, our consulting practice. Like, yeah, I mean, we literally give people our methodology on how to build process. We give them the templates on how they can do it themselves. And they're like, whoa, I am not about to spend like literally 1,000 hours plus doing this for my entire business. Like, let's just call Escala and they'll do it for us. And, you give people the secret sauce, but it's one thing to have the information and it's another to be the professional in the space, delivering it day in, day out. And that's the one thing that you do in life. And so coming to like, I just did a course called Exit DNA. Mac Lackey has had 6 exits. He's an angel investor in 75 plus companies. Life-changing experience, this course, life-changing experience having him in my corner for any strategic advice that I might ever have. I'd still never sell my business by myself. I would still go to a professional, because I think this is the thing. And I know we're going to wrap up here in a second, but I think one of the key things when we talk about selling businesses to realize is that, you look at the fees, right? People can often be very short-sighted and say, right, I'm going to give up 5, 10, 15, 20, I don't know, depending on the structure, whatever percentage it is, I'm going to give that much up to a broker. Why would I do that? I'll do my own deal flow. I'll go through this whole process. And what I would argue is, well, how big is that actual offer going to be with them versus without them? And are you actually being foolish in thinking that 15%, that 10%, that 5%, whatever it is, whatever that percentage is, that's not the deal that you're going to get. That's the deal that they're going to get. So be very aware of the time investment and what the actual yield or the payout is going to be. And we're talking life-changing money. So
100%, man. So what you just described, I call the off-market fallacy. And that's like, I have so many personal friends, they'll sell privately and then like apologize to me on Facebook, hey man, sorry I didn't use you, right? Because they're afraid of the commission, but they don't get that they're actually paying a much bigger cost typically by going privately, because selling a business is what I call a highlight event for entrepreneurs. It's not something you're doing every day. And you're exactly right. The short-sightedness really kicks in because they're not doing like the vision planning like they would have done with their normal business. Like us as entrepreneurs, we're wearing our copywriter hat when we're writing our ads and doing our marketing. But then when it comes to actually selling the business, we take that copywriter hat, throw it in the trash, like never consider the buyer at all, right? With what they want to get a better deal. And we don't consider competition, all sorts of factors. A recent example was there was this guy, he had a really great high quality Amazon FBA business. Someone offered him $1.4 million. They say you had like 3 days to make the decision or it's gone, which is like, that's a thing that these private deals often do to get you that urgency thing. But he came to us and we sold it for 2.1 million, right? And 1.8 million of that was up front. So he got an extra $400,000 in his pocket just by using us. And yeah, he paid us a much bigger commission than if he had sold it for 1.4, but he ends up walking away with way more money because of that. So, I mean, that's not going to be true in every case. Obviously, sometimes it does make sense to go private. It's not all bad. Obviously, both options are very valid, but it's worth exploring if you're going to sell something you spent so much of your life and sweat equity building, right? To explore all the options out there.
I mean, spot on. That's the crux of it. And that's, the reality is like, it's not even like Multiply Me coming here and, the true cost to a business when you talk about a bad hire is 15 times what their base salary is. So obviously we're placing talent out of the Philippines. So the cost to the business is probably not going to be as large, and you'll make the mistakes, you'll lose your time, you'll invest, etc. When you're talking about selling a business, which is exactly as you put it, a highlight event in an entrepreneur's life, and usually leads to more realistically, that's something that I'm not trying to fuck with from a personal standpoint. So find a professional. And that's actually a great segue, knowing that we have to wrap up here, is that anyone that's listening that wants to list, get in touch, speak to you, learn from your marketing absolute awe and wonder of what you're able to achieve, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or buy, sell, or everything else in between when it comes to their business?
Yeah, if you're interested in buying or selling, empireflippers.com. You can register for a free marketplace account there. On the buy side, if you're a seller, I'd recommend filling out our evaluation tool. That'll give you like an estimation using real sales back data. And it's very short. It takes you like less than 5 minutes to do it. And that gives you a good ballpark, whether you use us or not. It's a really good thing. We have people who use it just to go sell privately, but they'll still use our tool to make sure they're in the ballpark. But yeah, so those are good places for buyers and sellers. If you want to connect with me personally, you can always add me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm more active on LinkedIn nowadays when it comes to business stuff, or just email me, greg@empireflippers.com. I'm usually pretty easy to reach for the most part. My inbox can get a little bit crowded, but I promise I'll get back to you.
Love it, and love that laugh, mate. Well, Greg, it's been a pleasure. I'm excited to have many more conversations on air, off air about all things marketing, because like I said, I love what you do specifically and what you and your team have been able to achieve. So great stuff. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat about all things. We didn't even get to talking about building dispersed teams, so I might have to have you back on because
I'm happy to come back on.
I'm sure that's going to be a topic that we just both absolutely soak up. So again, thanks for your time, mates, and let's do it again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.